Indriyani indriyarthebhyas tasya prajna pratisthita tasmagyasya mahabaho nigrahitani sarvashah indriyani indriyarthebhyas tasya prajna pratisthita. So this is verse number 68 of Srimad Bhagavad Gita. Tasmat, therefore, yasya, whose, mahabaho, O mighty armed one, nigrahitani, to curb down, sarvasha, all around, indriyani, the senses, indriya arthebhya, from sense objects, tasya, his, prajna, intelligence, pratisthita, fixed. Therefore, O mighty armed, one whose senses are restrained from the objects is certainly of steady intelligence. One can purport by Srila Prabhupada ki jai. One can curb the forces of sense gratification only by means of Krishna consciousness, or engaging all the senses in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. As enemies are curbed by superior force, the senses can similarly be curbed, not by any human endeavor, but only by keeping them engaged in the service of the Lord. One who has understood this, that only by Krishna consciousness is one really established in intelligence, and that one should practice this art under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master, is called a sadhaka, or a suitable candidate for liberation. Om Ajnanam Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Sa Padantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnava Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadhvaitam Savdutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhan Vitam Cha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Shri Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Pancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Vaibhacha Patitanam Pavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vatsari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So in chapter 2, as we said previously, that this is the summary of entire Bhagavad Gita, and Krishna in verse number 13 started to explain Arjun that we are not these material bodies. So who are we? And Krishna explained that we are the soul. Now how come this soul is caged in the material body? And what is material body and how is it different from the soul? So Krishna is trying to give previews and insights into this very fine and subtle knowledge, which is not visible otherwise. This knowledge is not available, not visible from the material senses and from the material consciousness. This knowledge is only available to the eligibles, which are made eligible by Krishna himself as devotee of his own. So this knowledge cannot even be read by people who are not devotees, be transmitted into their senses, into their intelligence, into their minds, because this knowledge cannot be acquired. This knowledge can only descend and be given. Now, when Krishna is now talking about the senses and how senses are different from the soul, he's also talking about the nature of the soul as well as the nature of the senses. In previous verses, in last few sessions, all of us are hearing about how Krishna is talking about the transcendental qualities of the soul. The soul can never die. It cannot be withered. It cannot be cut into pieces. It cannot be dried by the wind, and so on. And therefore, soul is transcendental because it does not belong to the world of birth and death. However, if the soul has the desire to enjoy the material energy, material world, to enjoy that material world, to give fulfillment to that particular desire, Lord has designed this material world in which the soul is then given an appropriate rightful body made of senses and sense objects. So sense objects are created for the enjoyment of the senses, so that the material living entity enjoy this material world. And therefore, Krishna then describes about the senses, how these senses are operating. The senses are described as snakes and always looking for engagement with their sense objects. All the sense objects are there to give gratification to the senses. However, soul is unable to enjoy these sense objects through the senses, although it appears to the living entity or the soul that he's enjoying. Actually, it is defined that he's continuously suffering, because the engagement of the senses with sense objects only creates temporary happiness. And therefore, Krishna is saying that there is temporary happiness and there is a permanent happiness. Now, this permanent happiness can only be obtained if one learns to restrict the tendency of senses to go to the sense objects for sense gratification. And he gave example of a tortoise. If a tortoise withdraws his senses by seeing and only brings them out when it is required. So now in this particular verse, in the purport, Srila Prabhupada is giving a golden formula. So he's saying that can you really restrict your senses? Can you really refrain from your senses by not engaging into the sense objects? Yes, there were ages in the days when the yogis, they used to sit for thousands and thousands of years. Their lifespan was 100,000 years, and for tens and tens thousands of years, they would do tapasya, austerity, and in that tapasya, they'll focus their intelligence and mind into meditation of the Supreme Lord, and some point in time, they will get control of their complete senses through the processes of yoga, pranayama, pranayama, and all kinds of yogic processes. And by doing that, they could get control over their mind and their senses. And then their senses are not engaged. And that's a very, very hard way of austerities and tapasyas. But our parampara, Gaudiya Vaishnava parampara, and Lord Chaitanya's mercy, Lord Nityananda's mercy, they have given us a golden formula. They are saying that you cannot stay unengaged. Your senses has to be constantly engaged. So what do? How do you control these senses? Because controlling senses means that senses shouldn't go for sense enjoyment. It's as simple as that. But if the senses are going for sense enjoyment, you cannot control the senses, because now they're engaged and they would need that constantly. It's like an addiction. It's like a drug. When you take this drug and then you take a little and then little more and then little more, you get addicted to it. Sense objects are like addiction to the senses, and it is very, very difficult to give them up. So you need to find, therefore, a replacement. And here, that golden formula is given. Prabhupada has given the purport, and one who had understood only by Krishna consciousness, one is really established in intelligence, and one should practice this by engaging all the senses in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. Now, this is what is ensuring that when the senses are going to be engaged in the service of the Lord, at that time, the senses will not desire separate entertainment or engagement or gratification from the sense object, because now the consciousness is changed from self-enjoyment to the enjoyment of the senses of Krishna. And this particular philosophical part of our movement is very, very powerful modus operandi, in the sense that if I engage my senses in this way, then I am uprooting my material desires by the same tools which are going to anchor me into the material energy. So what is anchoring us in the material energy? The powerful senses. But same powerful senses, when utilized in the service of Krishna, will help us to de-anchor ourselves from the material energy and bring us out of the material entanglements. Same senses. They are not going to be harmful anymore. One time I was in discussion on some philosophical point. I was asking a question to His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj, and he said to me, "Kaante se kaanta nikalo," which means you take a sharp, you can prick a sharp object if it's gone in the skin through another sharp object, through a pin, or you can take another sharp object which is pierced into your skin. You can't take it otherwise. It's impossible. Similarly, your senses are the very means to go back to Godhead. Just like material energy is creating this environment of imprisonment, the cage of the body. This cage of the body has ribs, has bones, has mucus, has blood, and all kinds of coverings. And on the top covering, one would feel that one is so beautiful. And one feels that this is what you are. But actually, this is a cage. This is a cage in which the soul is restricted to perform and act under the limitation of the senses. Otherwise, soul, Satyachit Anand, the soul has the power to enjoy unlimitedly, to enjoy beyond the limitations of any boundaries. What to talk about senses, what of all the material world. Now this soul is imprisoned into the cage of these senses. And these senses are forcing living entity to enjoy. And the king of those senses is the mind. Mind, who has the nature of reject and select, refuse or want. So travels between future and present, future and past. Mind is traveling between future and past and constantly accepting or rejecting, So it wants more, and it goes in the future, and it would give you fears and anxieties. It goes into the past, it gives you all kinds of hankering. And whenever you are in the present, it will either show that past was good, or show the future will be good, or show that past was really bad and future will be really good, or other way around. So this is the function of the mind. And with this kind of functionality of the mind, all of the senses become slave to the mind. So Krishna is saying that you control your mind. He's saying that one cannot achieve spiritual advancement if one's senses are constantly engaged in sense gratification. So this is the mandate he's giving. And here he's referring Arjuna as, "O mighty armed, Mahabaho, O Arjun, you have the power to release Brahmastra. You are the most powerful warrior on the planet Earth. You are so powerful, Mahabaho. But can you curb down your senses? Even though you're so powerful, can you curb down your senses and restrain them from the sense objects? How can you do this?" And he's saying by steady intelligence. It has nothing to do with your powers that you possess on your body, but by the power of your intelligence, steady intelligence. How do you sharpen the intelligence? By Shastra, by knowledge. That is what Krishna is giving to Arjuna at this point in time. He's giving the transcendental knowledge. With that knowledge, he can now sharpen his intelligence. And with that intelligence, he can control all the senses. When he controls all the senses, in that way, he can then utilize his senses in the service of the Lord. On this occasion, he has to utilize his senses to fight for Krishna, against those people who is not willing to fight because they are his relatives and friends, and the relations is not ordinary relations, you have blood relations. And therefore, Krishna is giving this gyan and knowledge to him and to us through Arjuna, that how we should control our senses. One can think that, okay, I can advance in Krishna consciousness, at the same time I can do all my stuff. Srila Prabhupada, on the very start, on the very beginning of the spiritual life, mentioned that you have to follow these 4 regulative principles and minimum. So there are do's and don'ts. You have to follow both. But he started life with do's as well as don'ts together. He didn't say that you continue eating meat, engage in the sex life, and do all kinds of activities with regards to gambling and drinking and addictions, and then keep chanting as well. As the students came closer to Srila Prabhupada and they were chanting, he started to give them that purity, that you start engaging your senses in the service of the Lord. By doing so, then you can disengage them, because senses can be engaged at only one place. They can't be engaged in both the places. But at one point in time, you can't do simultaneously material activity as well as spiritual activity. As I was trying to explain last time, if there's a scale of activities, and this side is the spiritual activity on the left-hand side, and right-hand side is the material activity. And if the material activity right now is 100%, the material activity has to gradually reduce. So this mix will always remain 100, but the spiritual life will increase. Spiritual life becomes 20%, material life becomes 80%, and so on. Spiritual life becomes 50%, material life becomes 50%, and further on. But spiritual life becomes 80%, material life becomes 20%, and at the end, the spiritual life becomes 100%, material life becomes 0%. Now, for a life of a devotee, there's nothing like material life. And I'm talking about devotees who are pure devotees, Uttam Adhikari or Madhyam Adhikari, Uttam Adhikari, who has come to the platform of Madhyam Adhikari. People like Srila Prabhupada and his so many disciples that we are knowing of. And there are many more devotees of the Lord in the history. And we can see that how their material life is 0, because they aren't able to see anything but Krishna in everything that they do. At some point in time, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj was using the top-class cars in the city of Calcutta, and he was demonstrating the principle of a yukta vairagya, that how everything can be utilized in the service of Krishna. And if there is no difference in the consciousness, but if somebody thinks that, okay, Bhaktisiddhanta was doing this, I can also do this. Let me also utilize, let me buy some expensive cars and then I'll utilize in the service of Krishna. No, that's not the right mood. The right mood is, let me become the devotee of Krishna. When we have right consciousness, then we'll see everything in light of that consciousness. Then we will not see that as an expensive car. We'll see just another piece of material technology which can be utilized in the service of Lord. We'll not be hankering for the name and fame that is associated with the so-called the brands and the wealth of the world. I was hearing His Holiness Lokanath Swami Maharaj. He was saying that we all are wanting to acquire wealth, and we all want wealth in this world. But what is real wealth? And he was explaining that how real wealth is the holy names of the Lord. Hari Nama Prema Dhan. He's saying like that. That's the wealth that is worth acquiring. Because after having that wealth of Hari Nam, then everything else will diminish. the importance will diminish in our consciousness. At the moment, my house becomes very important to me. My car, my job, my designations, my identity as this body, and my identity as that social person who is philanthropic, who is a great who believes in donations and charities and helps people. So there's a subtle name and fame associated with it. Even though you're not doing abominable activities and you're doing pious activities, even they are going to become hurdle in the advancement of spiritual life if they are not done for Krishna or for the cause of Krishna consciousness. But when one does that for the cause of Krishna consciousness, Srila Prabhupada explains that if you give donation, you cannot participate directly in the activities of Krishna consciousness. You cannot give your time to us. You cannot give your intelligence or mind to us by reading scriptures. Okay, can you give Lakshmi that you're earning, the fruits of your results for Krishna consciousness? Somebody was asking me, isn't it very rude to ask for money when you give books out? And Prabhupada said, no, we should ask for money for the book that you're giving out in the hands of the and hands of the conditioned soul, because by giving that money, their activities and their intelligence will get purified. This is Agyat Sukriti that they are going to earn, because now they're utilizing their senses in earning money, which is again getting used in the service of the Lord. And that is the philosophical point that this is mentioned in this particular verse. That way you can control your senses. My tendency is to enjoy, okay, go and enjoy. But you know, at least the last thing you can do is give your results to Krishna. By doing so, your heart will get purified, your desires will get purified, and then you can come from the worst stage of enjoyment of the material senses into the stage, step by step, to the stage of now directly doing devotional service to the Lord. When devotees take initiation and they start following the principles even prior and after, and they become serious in their spiritual life, and when they start serving, at some point in time they start even serving the deities of the Lord. The deities of the Lord are not different from the Lord himself. If the senses are engaged in servicing the deities of the Lord, in cooking for the Lord, in looking after the Lord, dressing up the Lord, offering artis and paraphernalia to the Lord, reading Srimad Bhagavatam to the Lord, dancing in front of the deities, doing kirtans around deities, then life becomes completely surrounded by this atmosphere, and our senses, they become subdued. Just like when you take the fangs of the snake away, the snake's poison cannot impact you. Similarly, the desires might be there in the heart, but senses are engaged in the service of the Lord, performing devotional service, Navada Bhakti. In that way, one is able to purify his intelligence, and that engagement in the service of the Lord ensures that you progress in the spiritual life to the extent that is what is mentioned at that stage. Prabhupada has mentioned that you are called a sadhaka. But this sadhaka becomes a suitable candidate for liberation. One time, a press officer asked Srila Prabhupada, how many devotees do you have? Or rather, how many pure devotees do you have? He said, how many members do we have in this Kona organization? And some number was thrown to him, and he said, that many pure devotees are there. And he said, what are you saying? The pressman said to Prabhupada, they have just joined. They were hippies. They've just joined. They said, yes. It is like the mango example he gave was the mango tree. As long as this mango, even though they are raw right now and they're green, as long as they are hanging and stay attached to the tree of mango, in due course of time, you will realize that without even any extra effort, these mangoes will become ripened. And when the mangoes become ripened, they become very sweet and juicy, and when you pluck them out, that's the real fruit that you can eat. Similarly, all these newcomers, so-called, you're saying them newcomers, they have joined us now, and they're sure to go back to Godhead. They are all pure devotees. In due course of time, you will realize that if If they stay attached to the process of Krishna consciousness, they will become ripened. They are the suitable candidates for the liberation, and they'll reach to Krishna, back to Godhead, without a doubt. And we can see these statements that are spoken by Srila Prabhupada in late 60s and early 70s. We can see that how, even after 50 years, the devotees who have been following their vows, they became such powerful, noble, and pure devotees of the Lord that they have inspired hundreds and thousands of other conditioned souls, and they have given shelter by giving initiation and proving to us that this process works. It's a bona fide process that is given, that is laid as a seed into the heart of Arjun at that point in time of Mahabharata, 5,000 years ago, is still very, very relevant in our lives, and we can live through these principles of surrender and controlling our senses. So, in conclusion, I could say that if one thinks that he can do whatever he wants to do with the sense and at the same time progress in the spiritual life, that is not going to happen. At some point in time, introspection is required. And one who is serious to advance, and one who really wants to see the result, when you put something on the fire, when the oil is cold, there's nothing happening. When the oil warms up and becomes heated, you put frames and frame just puffs up, becomes big. That's the result. You want to see that result? You have to have that fire and the oil. Similarly, we want to see the result of purity in our heart. We want to see the result of devotion, because the result of devotion is annihilation of the material desires. You want to see that annihilation of material desires, then the process is that we control our senses. Some people believe, or some organizations believe, that you give more to the senses and give even more to the senses. One day you will say, no, I'm frustrated, I don't want this anything anymore, and I want to go, I want to take nirvana. But this is quite contradictory to what Krishna is saying. He's saying when you go fulfill your desires and run after the sense objects through your senses, it acts like oil in the fire. When you pour more oil, the fire becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. You keep pouring more oil, the fire will keep becoming more and more. So the essence is that the desires will continue to expand, and those who are rich will want to become richer, and those who are richer would want to become even more rich. There is no end to it, because the fuel of desires is fueling further desires, and those desires are fueling further more desires, and it's a ripple effect. And so the oil and the fire will act like that, as opposed to not putting the oil in the fire. We can see the results will be that gradually fire will come down, and at some point in time, if you don't pour more oil, the fire has to be completely annihilated, finished. In the same sense, the material desires will go down and down by the process of Krishna consciousness, by chanting Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, without the offenses. The 10 offenses are there in chanting of the holy name of the Lord. When we do that, then they will curb the seed of the desire, even at the state of, sorry, the seeds of desires at various stages, even at the stage of unmanifested stage. Such sinful reactions, which are seated in our hearts as desires, will also be burnt away, completely burnt away. Just like in the forest fire, the snakes get burnt completely. Similarly, all these desires will be annihilated by the very, very powerful process of bhakti, which is chanting of the holy names of the Lord, engaging the senses in the service of the Lord. That way we can control our senses, and being in the association of the devotees. So with that, it's already 8:38. I would request devotees, if there is any comment or question, they can please, this is the time that we can take some comments or questions. I do want to go into the deeper part of this subject through some pastimes in the Canto 4 of Srimad Bhagavatam. If somebody is more interested, I would strongly recommend to read from Canto 4, the creation of the fourth order. And there's a beautiful conversation between Narad and King Prachin Bari in chapter 29. If opportunity comes again, then I'll go through these couple of chapters in our sessions. But if somebody is interested, please read the story of Puranjan, which is explained by Narad Muni. And it is described from, I would say, chapter 25, rather chapter 20, yeah, chapter 25 to chapter 29 in Canto 4. Please read through these chapters. You'll get more insight into the elaborate description on how the senses are binding the conditioned soul to the material world, and how one can get out of this kind of situation. So please, if you have comment or question, we can talk about it now. Okay, there's something in the chat. There's no question here. All right, in that case, I would Hare Krishna Mataji.
Prabhuji, very, very beautifully explained. It's very nice.
Thank you for encouragement, Mataji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Krishnani Mataji ki jai.
Manu Prabhu ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare. Okay, there are one comment came through. Okay, there's one appreciation. Thank you, Meena Mataji. Then there is a comment. Okay, there's a message. Hare Krishna Prabhu. Can one become devotee without much philosophy? Philosophy is the last thing required to become a devotee. Hardly any philosophy is required, but the point is that to see the difference between reality and illusion, because we are so conditioned, we require some sort of understanding. If we are in constant illusion and there is no torchlight in the darkness, there's no light in the darkness, we will not be able to see the truth. Therefore, the spiritual master gives us the understanding of the difference between the soul and the body, and then gives us understanding that we are part and parcel of the God, of Supreme Lord, and our purpose is to go back to Him. Therefore, all these understanding explanations, this is nothing but philosophy. So philosophy is not philosophizing the subjects different from the Supreme Lord, or having an interest which is separate from the Lord. That's not philosophy. The philosophy here is anything that gives us more information about the Lord, and anything that gives us information about ourselves and the process. Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan. Sambandha is a relationship between the living entity and the Lord, and Abhideya is the process to develop or rekindle or reawaken the dormant love in the heart that we have for Krishna. And Prayojan is the goal that we need to achieve, which is nothing but love of God. So the explanations which gives us understanding of Sambandh, Abhideya, and Prayojan, that explanation is nothing but philosophy. Now, if one has already understood in their past lives and has come to a point that they don't need to understand this anymore, they become a startup without any philosophy, and they're always engaged in the service of the Lord. So by singing and dancing and doing seva for the deities, etc. But if one is not at that platform, would definitely need understanding of Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojan so that they can start their process. They can start the Abhideya and reach to the Prayojan. And to that extent, it is important. So I hope that answers, Mataji, this question. That question was from, I can only see Pardha, Pardha, or Prabhu, I'm not sure. So I hope that is satisfactory. Santosh Sharma Mataji. Okay, thank you, Mataji, for your appreciation. There's Nitai Mata Devi Dasi Mataji. Her appreciation is there. Thank you for allowing a chance for introspection. Thank you, Mataji. Surabhi Mataji saying Hare Krishna Pranam, the fire inside is extinguished by curbing senses. Any thoughts on science, innovations, sports, entertainment industry, which only thrive on thinking in all directions? Okay, so this is a place, this material world is a place of constant enjoyment, deceptive enjoyment. Actually, it's a place of dukhalaya shashvata. But living entity, just like a pig is sitting in the spit of stool and eating it and enjoying with the sheep pigs, etc., and thinking that he's having a great life of fun entertainment. Similarly, living entity who has no interest and who has got separate interest from the Lord is simply getting engaged in this tool and of this material energy and getting more and more enslaved and deteriorated from human life to animal life and so on. So the senses that we have, for each sense there is an industry in the material world. Industry, we talked about it. There's a beauty industry looking after the skin. There's a clothing and fashion industry looking after the looks. There is a food industry looking after the palate of the tongue. A huge industry. And another industry, there are innovations. There's microwaves. There are ovens. And there are, you buy an oven, then you make a dough. Buy a dough, then make a bread, then make a bread cutter. Get a bread cutter, then you get a bread keeper. And then you get a fridge to keep that bread. And then you eat that food, which may be stale after some time. So there's an industry around every single sense that we have. Nail, almost insignificant existence. There's a nail industry now these days. There are products around nails. There are nail bars, for God's sake. You can go and put nails and then false nails and long nails and all kinds of nails. Hair industry, all kinds of shampoos and all kinds of conditioners and oils, and go to the supermarket, you're flooded with the choices that you can have. It's just unbelievable the amount of products and industries are created around all the senses that we have. Entertainment industry, just to give pleasure to the mind and eyes. Pornographic industry, huge industry, thriving. Alcohol, drugs. So all of this, which is around the senses, is making this mad living entity who's described like a monkey who's drunk like a mad monkey and trying to enjoy this world. These industries are making them further mad. In lockdown, people realize that they haven't got superstore to go. They haven't got anything else to do. How much television can they see? How much can they? So they become depressed. What do? They don't know that the real purpose of the life is to go to back to Godhead. Those who are devotees, they're taking full advantage. They're doing these kind of sanghas and associations. They're doing Bhagavatam reading. They're getting golden opportunity to read Prabhupada's book, to kirtan, make prasadam, serve the deities at home, and engage themselves completely and soaked. So they're dancing in the morning, they're dancing in the evening at their homes, making nice cakes and everything for the service of the Lord, for serving the deities of the Lord, and meeting all other devotees or phoning them and coming to this kind of association. So that's the real utilization of time and senses. So your comment around the fact that there are so much of industries and everybody is forced to think in that direction, that this is a time again for understanding our own consciousness and introspect that what do we want to do with our next generation? What do you want to do with our children? Do we want to make them go into this industry, or do we really want to make them pure devotees of the Lord? If you hear some of the lectures that His Holiness Bhakti Charu Swami Maharaj has delivered in Ujjain before he arrived to America and left this planet, you'll be amazed to hear what he's saying. He's saying that if you are sincere devotees, save yourselves, but save your children. Make sure they become pure devotee of the Lord and facilitate their direction, facilitate their lives in such a way that they are directed towards Krishna consciousness. Otherwise, all we will have a cookie cutter, approach of our children, and what will happen to their spiritual life? Because death is not going to wait for anybody. It will come anytime, take them away, take us away, and will not become perfect in our endeavor to become Krishna conscious. So it's a very important point, Mataji. Thank you very much for bringing that point up.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Okay, I think that kind of ends the session. There are a few more appreciations. So thank you all for these appreciations. These appreciations are for Srila Prabhupada, because we are just reading his books and we have no intelligence of our own, and we are trying to follow some parts of it. Therefore, all glories to the Vaishnavas and all glories to Srila Prabhupada. So now we can pay obeisances to all the Vaishnavas assembled here and Vaishnavas in our parampara, so we can get their blessings to continue in the process and endeavor of Krishna consciousness. Vanchakalparubhyascha kripa sindhubheva cha patithanam bhavnebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Wonderful class. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.